Saul, I know that you've directed film as well as you've directed on TV, but is that kind of, I mean, is there a different mindset for TV or?
Well, TV's shot very, very quickly. So it's physically very tough to do an episode of Doctor Who. It's 12 or 13 days, and you get the script at the beginning and you go, can't do this. It's never going to happen. And somehow in the end it always happens. But yeah, certainly with Doctor Who, a lot of it is to do with, I think, Matt Smith's physicality and getting as much movement going around this amazing guy who just spins and dances and everything. I very quickly learned that a lot of directing Doctor Who was to do with Matt Smith head turns. So Matt Smith would turn and you'd cut to another shot and turn. And then the really classic Doctor Who shot is when Matt Smith turns into his close-up. And so then you have ones like in The Name of the Doctor where he turns into his close-up in such a dramatic way that not only does the camera come forward, it goes down slightly. And it's and these are all the things you talk about on set. But but just getting a lot of movement, a lot of excitement into it. But the way he's incredible, because what happens is sometimes you read a bit of it and you don't know how to do it. And then Matt comes on set and he walks around the set just sort of moving around, and suddenly you have like 10, 15 ideas how to shoot a scene. I mean, it's really incredible. I thoroughly recommend it for any director who's got no ideas left to have Matt Smith come on set.
And Stephen, from your point of view, I know obviously both you and Mark have written for the show over a period of time, but you had the opportunity then to kind of create your own Doctor from scratch, so to speak. And I just wanted to know kind of how much of that came from Matt, obviously when you'd cast him, and how much was already there in your mind before that?
Oh, weirdly, I mean, what you do when you cast the Doctor is that you get somebody that you think can create a Doctor. I mean, the Doctor on paper, I know I keep saying this and no one really quite believes me, but the Doctor on paper is pretty consistent down the years from a very, very long time ago. So you can find somebody who can really dance with that, who can really do something else. Now, I think it felt to Matt, because he always talked about it this way, as if he was excavating everything from the script, and I was putting more and more things in for him, and Mark was, and everyone was. But the truth was, he was sort of leading that. You're sort of seeing what he does with it, how he spins it. I mean, we all knew when the first time. I think I remember the first time he did the turn into close up, and you realise that is just defining it. Nobody. I never said it to him during his time on the show because it would be too intimidating to say it. But the fact was, you just waited every episode for him to do his big turn and watch it. He's got 7 in The Name of the Doctor. He's never facing the right way. He's always having to turn around. No, it's brilliant, absolutely amazing.
And one thing that you and Mark both share is obviously a real passion for the show, both in the past and in terms of where it's going now. And both of you had written during Russell T Davies's kind of tenure. Yeah. But I'm interested to know, kind of as writers at that point, kind of how much you can get involved and how much kind of are you just sort of providing something and then it's kind of completely handed over. And obviously now you've taken it the full. But in terms of initially, how much of kind of Russell's stamp was on those kind of those early episodes, or how does that work? That kind of commissioning process.
Well, I mean, as Saul was just saying, Doctor Who is made in a permanent state of crisis. Permanent. Ongoing state of desperation and pain. So the idea that it's not like someone's putting their stamp on it, saying, how are we going to get a decent script in? Having got the decent script in, how are we going to get it made? So it's not like that. It's not like that. Russell had very, very clear and simply put ideas about how the show was going to come back. And it feels like 100 years ago, but it was very clear the Doctor...
The 100th anniversary, isn't it?
Yeah, 100th anniversary. Oh, don't. I've already told them I'm not doing it. The Doctor was not posh. He must speak plainly. All the new orthodoxies that he brought in. But if a writer shows up, a director shows up, an actor shows up, and gives you something brilliant, but which is not what you expect, you air punch. You're cheering. There's nothing bad about that. The main directive I give to everybody in Doctor Who is treat it like you own it. Don't come in and be reverent. Don't come in and try and imitate me or Russell or Terry Nation or somebody else. Come in and behave as if it's yours, because that's the only way you can write Doctor Who properly. That's pretty true, isn't it, Mark? Do you think?
Yeah, one thing I do remember, though, very vividly, actually, was when David took over, there was a funny little period amongst a sea of lies.
A sea of lies.
That I remember Russell saying, it's all the same, it's Chris and Billy, everything's the same, and it wasn't. And I do remember very well him saying, one thing David can do is really big speeches.
Yes.
And that was like essentially the only directive for his Doctor, because then the rest of it was formed around David's personality. And as ever, as Stephen says, it's like a planet coming together. little bits and pieces of information, but then incredibly mostly the personality of the actor and everything they bring to it suddenly becomes. I remember very well on Victory of the Daleks, there was a funny moment where it's an incredibly grave moment, and Matt suddenly put an RAF hat on. Yeah. And we had to go, no, that's not right. Yeah. But he was just trying so many things that it didn't actually suit the tempo of the scene, but he was just shooting all over the place. And I think that always happens with doctors. They're trying things out, and then suddenly it becomes a formed personality.
How much flexibility does somebody like Matt have? Is a script rigid and there, or is that something that kind of comes out during the kind of? Is there a rehearsal process?
There isn't much of a one.
Just to say, right at the beginning when I started, I had Karen, Arthur, and Matt, and I got them in a room for rehearsal, and they sat there and they went, "What's this?" Oh, what do we do in one of these? So very little.
You must find that though, Dan. Do you think there's a sort of, do you feel the absence, or is it quite good to sort of just go for it?
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot of time, quite a lot of my sort of performance is circumscribed by being in the costume as well. And so I've got to make sure, just because it is physically draining to actually do it, that I know what I'm doing before I go on set, so I'm not faffing around too much. Yeah, but within that, I think because quite a lot of the time, if Strax has got one line in a scene, chances are it's a funny one, and there's a certain way in which, I've got to make that land. And so, yeah, I do all my planning sort of like ahead with that sort of thing.
We pretty much stay to the script.
Yeah.
I mean, none of it's made up on the day.
No, it tends not to be, but if someone comes up with a brilliant gag, you keep it. I mean, or a brilliant line, you absolutely keep it every time. And what happened is also true of Sherlock, isn't it? That over time, maybe the first 2 years it didn't happen much. In the third year, there were more lines coming in. You thought, oh, that's good, I'm keeping that. I can't tell you what it is. There's a hilarious line that Matt improvs in Christmas. It's my favourite line in the episode. He just came out with it once. We had to go and find it in the rush because it was so funny. So it's not written that
sense. That's confidence, isn't it?
It's knowing it. It's knowing the show. It's not, but in general, there's enough to be getting on with on a shooting day of Doctor Who without saying, let's make it up. We try and make it up very thoroughly. We have lots of meetings, lots of drafts, it's a very considered document by the time the script gets to production. It's a very considered document. I'm not saying it's good, but it is considered. A lot of people have sulked about it, and we've all written many, many drafts.
Dan, when you came into the show, first of all, can you just tell us about kind of getting the role? Secondly, did you know at that point that you were going to be completely kind of covered head to toe and that actually you'd be kind of unrecognisable in the sands?
Yeah, well, I think I'd happened to give my agent a prod just randomly at the same time they were thinking to bring the Sontarans back, and they needed actors of a certain physical dimension to actually embody the characters, so it was quite fortuitous. But I was a huge fan of the series when I was a kid, and so I was able to get my VHS copy of the Time Warrior out, the first Sontaran episode, and so do my research to actually do that. But yeah, and so it was interesting going to the audition for the first time because I was aware that it was quite an extreme sort of like the 70s prosthetic is clearly very heavy and it really doesn't move. The eyes and the tongue poke out, but apart from that, it doesn't sort of move around very much. So it was quite a weird one, thinking what kind of level of energy can I give to actually make it read? And so my first reading was just to prove I am a proper actor and not just a screaming fanboy, and so made it quite straight. And then the producer Susie Liggett went, yeah, that's fine. Could you make it a little bit more alien? And so how far can I go with this? And then the Sontaran came out, which then clearly worked. But yeah, so I mean, again, I think it's the case of seeing what the actual script on the day is specifically asking you to do, and then you're given parameters by stuff that's gone on in the past, but then you've just got to make it real as you can, as you would with any other role.
And at what point did you realise this was going to be a recurring role? Because originally, obviously, it's just that you are the Sontaran and one of the Sontaran, And
yeah, well, but I hoped, since they were a clone race, that I stood a good, decent chance. So they probably might look like me or Chris Ryan, but yeah, and it was nice to be asked back. I did a little cameo in David's final episode where he bopped me with a mallet, but then obviously with The Good Man Goes to War, I didn't know sort of exactly before they said, oh, they want you back for Doctor Who, how big that was going to be. It might be just one line or something. And then Strax came along, and he's obviously a wonderfully fully formed character with many layers that we gradually get to know. And yeah, and then it was lovely that even though he died, he came back as well. So it's.
And so, Stephen, would you say to Mark, right, in your story, I'd like to have Strax and Vastra back in it, or would Mark say, I want to include them? I mean, how does
it could happen? It could happen either way. On the particular occasion of the Crimson Horror, I specifically wanted another Vastra, Jenny, and Strax story. I wanted them to lead it, and I wanted it to be Victorian, scary, grotesque, and horrible. And I thought of Mark as one word. But on other occasions, Mark might come to me, or any other writer might come to me and pitch a story. So it's to and fro. I mean, you are trying to make a whole series that all sort of fits together and covers all the bases. So you do. It can be a bit prescriptive at times. I'm working on the new series at the moment. I've got the whole thing in my head. I've memorized it, so I can do it out loud. I'm not going to. But, so you need a shape, but you know, loads of stuff comes from writers or just anyone saying they've got an idea for a story. I'm
one of the
a hoover up ideas.
I had it was on Cold War. I've been trying to persuade Steven for years to bring back the Ice Warriors, and he always quite rightly said they're very slow. I just love them so much. And then I also said, but I've always wanted to do a Doctor Who on a submarine. And then there was a moment of like, bah, the Ice Warriors on a submarine, and they come out of their shells. That was it, you know.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it was just a happy kind of.
It was a phone call about Sherlock.
Yeah,
we thought
best way to do it. Distraction.
Initially, at first, it felt as if you didn't want to kind of keep kind of going back and bringing sort of creatures out from the past. And obviously, there were so many new stories and new kind of creatures to talk about. But actually, it feels as if you're not quite as concerned about that as you perhaps were. Is that right?
I've never had a problem with bringing stuff back from the past. I think the reason to do so has changed. At the beginning, when Russell was first doing it, you needed to get the Daleks and the Cybermen and all that. And otherwise, you sort of think it wouldn't feel like proper Doctor Who. Now, somehow, the two series or the two versions of the show have just all joined up. Yeah. And no one really worries about that. So we're not raiding the back catalogue to gain approval. We're just saying, ooh, that's good. Can we have that? Or we could do something new with that. And there was 26 years of that show, and they came up with some really good stuff. So sometimes you want to grab it and do it again.